My Lords, it's a very great pleasure to follow the noble lady Baroness Boycott and to thank her for putting that important case study on our record. I rise chiefly to speak to Amendment 78 in the name of the noble lady Baroness Parmenter, to which I've also attached my name, as have the noble lady Baroness Jones of Whitchurch and Baroness Young of Old Scone. Before I get to that, of course, my noble friend has already covered the amendments with which we opened this group, and they've just been powerfully supported by the noble lady Baroness Boycott. But I do want to address briefly 77A, 79 and 80A, because in those three we've just heard very powerfully in the case of 77A from the noble lady Baroness McIntosh about the need for the OEP to have teeth and how her important change does that, something we'll be on, I suspect, for a good part of the rest of the day. The noble Lord Wigley, of course Wales needs the equal protection from environmental principles as is applying in England, and the noble Lord Hope, I think, has clearly identified a really important issue, so I'd like to offer support for all of those. But coming specifically to Amendment 78, and the noble lady Baroness Parmenter did a great job of introducing this, but I just want to, we're talking a great deal about security at the moment, and I really want to focus on two elements of this amendment, addressing the armed forces and defence policy and a little bit on Treasury, as others already have. Now, when we heard the noble lady Baroness Parmenter read out the letter from the Minister in the other place, it seems we have that great catch-out, security. Oh, it's security, we can't question any of that. Well, I'd point, noble Lords, to the recent integrated review, and indeed to the foreword of that, written by the Prime Minister, which says that in 2021 and beyond, Her Majesty's Government will make tackling climate change and biodiversity loss its number one international priority. This contribution further points out that the UN Security Council recently held its first ever high-level meeting on the impact of climate change on peace and security. So we should not be saying, well, here's security and here's environment, and security is going to overrule the environment. We're talking about the same thing here, and it's really important. The government says it grasps this, but I think it's very clear that it doesn't actually when it comes to its wording. And I think it's really important. The noble lady Baroness Parmenter referred to the fact that the MOD has so many SSSI sites. And that's really not surprising when the MOD controls nearly 2% of the UK. And looking at what that is, 82% of that is training areas and firing ranges, which of course we might think are natural sources of biodiversity, natural spaces where there's a great deal of nature, and 4% of airfields similarly. And I think it's useful to note that the armed forces themselves regard this as really important. Noble Lords might be aware of the Sanctuary Awards, which are awarded every year within the defence sector, aiming to showcase sustainability efforts across defence. So last year, the Silver Otter Trophy went to the Chicksands Historic Walled Garden project, which brings us back to an earlier debate about heritage being included in nature. And I note also that the Sustainable Business Award was won by the Portsmouth Naval Base's the Princess Royal and Victory Jetties project, which was to create sustainable moorings in Portsmouth. Well, it would be that if we saw the same thing happening in Oman, where we built a large new military base without any environmental assessment at all. But nonetheless, we are doing this here in the UK. So I think it's really important that we get the government to see that security and environment are not in opposition to each other, but joined up. And finally, on that point about being joined up, I apologise to noble Lords because I'm going to mention something I've mentioned many times before. But when we come to Treasury not being covered by the Environment Bill, let's look at New Zealand. New Zealand Treasury puts at its absolute heart a living standards framework, something informed by the Sustainable Development Goals, putting environment, economy, security all together. If the government wants to be world-leading, then we need to see all aspects of its activities covered by this bill, but particularly the activities of Treasury.